Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. I am available to deliver keynote presentations and workshops for your company or for your conference. Reach out to me, DaveDelaneySpeaks.com, or email me and we can talk. Now on with the show.
Hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
A teammate of mine grabbed my sport coat, my suit jacket from behind. I remember I had a big Dunkin' Donuts coffee and my laptop bag in the other hand. And he pulled me out of the elevator, like as the door was closing, with this regional manager and I guess it was his executive assistant, on the elevator. And like I spilled the coffee, I turn around, kind of like WTF, like what in the world just happened?
Yeah.
And he said, you never, ever ride on the elevator with that guy. And I remember thinking, I never, ever want to come across that way.
Nice.
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 Nice. Nice.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice with Dave Delaney.
Welcome to the Nice Podcast, all about communication, collaboration, and becoming better leaders. Today, I'm chatting with Ben Landers, the CEO of Blue Corona. They help home service companies grow and measure marketing solutions that increase sales, reduce costs, and differentiate brands online. Ben, thank you for joining me on the Nice Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave.
So I always like to open with this question, which is, what's the nicest thing someone has done for you recently?
Nicest thing someone has done for me recently. It's funny. This wasn't necessarily recent, but the nicest thing that I can remember that was ever done for me is actually work related. We have we do a weekly huddle. So an all company meeting, where we get the team together on Monday morning. It's like 15 minutes and we go through company news, quick update on how we're doing towards our quarterly goals. Insights, so people share things that happen within the business that we want others on the team, may not be exposed to. And then, I'll sometimes end with a thought, something for people to keep top of mind, as the week goes. And so one time, this was pre-COVID, so we were in person. We had an office in Maryland with about 30 people and an office in Charlotte, North Carolina with about 60 people. And we get to the insights portion of the huddle. And someone that had never shared, kind of like accounts payable, HR administrative person said, hey, I have a share and I need the computer. I need to take control of the computer. And I thought, what could Michelle possibly be sharing that she needs to take the control of the computer?
Right.
And she pops on a YouTube video. I had gone on vacation for a week. And while I was gone, I had no idea, but it was like Boss's Appreciation Day or something goofy. And they had made this video, which is on YouTube if you want to check it out. And it is, it's like the nicest thing anyone's ever done. I certainly wasn't expecting it. We have a couple layers of management. And so, I'm not directly managing most of the people on the team. And I'm an easy crier. And I was like blinking furiously. I didn't start crying in front of like 30 employees in Maryland and then all the people that were watching from afar. And so that was a couple of years ago. But when you asked that was one of those ones where you're just like, I can't possibly deserve this.
I love that. I love the fact that they took the time to do that and to
you usually get like a card, with a Starbucks, gift card. And it's like, what do I need that for? I'm the owner of the company. I don't, need stuff like that. Or like the card that says like, have a great day, signed name. like, don't do that. So it was awesome. And I'll never forget that one.
That's super cool. And as far as getting misty goes, I'll be 50 in April, and I was listening to WTF. Mark, do you know Mark Maron, the comedian, podcaster?
No.
Okay.
No.
It doesn't matter, but he's a pretty popular guy. But anyway, he, in his own right, he was talking, he's like in his, I guess, mid 50s probably at this point, but he was talking on an episode once a long time ago about suddenly, like when he turned around 45 or so, he was watching like one of those Cottonelle commercials with the, the kittens and the rolling toilet paper. And he started weeping, and he's like, what the hell is happening to me? And I'm like that now too.
I don't get that, but I get the, I have a 13-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. I'm married. And, we'll be sitting there watching like Rocky, where, Rocky 2, where, his wife's in a coma, and then she wakes up and says, Rocky, win. And like, I'm over there just sobbing, and my kids are like, Dad? Like, all right. So yeah, and then my wife now will call it out, like, have the waterworks started? Nothing ruins a good cry more than your wife, pointing all the attention, at you.
And you'll have plenty to cry about soon. I mean, I hope you don't, but with an 11-year-old daughter, our kids are 14 and 15, and, it's interesting. Yeah, things have taken a turn. They're great. Don't get me wrong. We are very lucky, but gosh, wow. Yeah. Teen years. Whew. So, obviously culture is clearly a big and very important part of your business. And that video is a great indicator, of that, kind of surprising you with that. Blue Corona is also a 9-time Inc. 5,000 company, which is wonderful. And congratulations, first of all, for that. Those are some big milestones there.
I appreciate it. My first job out of college was with a company called hotjobs.com. And my first day, a senior guy on the team was giving me a tour of the office. And there were these huge boxes of Inc. magazine with Richard Johnson, who was our CEO, on the cover. And he was like, that's our CEO on the cover of Inc. magazine. And I'm like, what is Inc. magazine? And he's like, looked at me like, seriously? And he's like, this is like the Bible for privately held, fast growing companies. And we were selling HR, recruitment software. So those were great companies to target. So starting my career at a company like that, and then every other company I've worked for except for one, all pursued that as a goal. So when I started Blue Corona, that was like goal number one. Let's qualify for it. And then I had a mentor and a business partner, and I said, I'd like to outrank him, in our first year of eligibility. And, we're really competitive like that. So and then we just kept that snowball rolling, really.
And so what year did you first get one of the awards there? You've been Blue Corona. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was 2012 was our first year. You got to do at least $1 million in revenue, to be, at least 100,000 in revenue to be eligible, privately held and all that kind of stuff. And then, so the first year that we did like $112,000 or $124,000. And then 3 years later, it's based on your 3-year growth rate. We had done like 2.2 or something like that. And, we would have been number one in Maryland, but Standard Solar, big solar company, had bought a company, and you could actually do that. I don't know if you can still do it, but back then you could acquire companies and count it as well. So if they had done it organically, we would have been the top, but they bought a company that was decent size, so they outranked us. But what are you gonna do?
I know, but that's great though. What are some of the ways, beyond just naturally being competitive enough to try to get these awards and being inspired by, previous, management like, Richard Johnson, you mentioned? Are there things that he did to inspire you to, not just getting the award, but also like tactics or things to do to have a great culture?
Great culture, not so much. I mean, when I kind of look at, I don't know if this is every entrepreneur, but, I had a bunch of jobs before starting the company, and, when I was starting the company, you kind of take inventory of all the best aspects of every place you ever worked and all the people that you worked for, and sort of, I kind of think of it like a tour bus, like a hippie tour bus, where stickers all over the back, like this car climbed Mount Washington.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you take all the best things that you've picked up over your career, and then, it's like when you're starting a business, it's like, hey, I want to have the kind of business that I would want to work for. And so, like in Richard's case, Richard was, I was in the Chicago office. We were headquartered in New York. I don't know how many employees we had when I was there, but we were a publicly traded company, so it was a decent sized company. But Richard would come to Chicago and take us to happy hour and have beers with the team. And, he was, on the one hand, you'd see him on CNBC and Wall Street Journal, but then he'd be sitting in a bar in Chicago talking to, the frontline sales guys and gals that were, I was right out of college. And so this guy is like, this multi-millionaire, bigger than life, great, really charismatic guy who's like, having beers with us, talking to us about the growth of the company, how much he appreciated what we did for the company and the calls that we made and closing business. And so I remember thinking like, and I've had other bosses that were like that, that were just, it's like there's one person, they're not like, it's not like, the business version and then the let loose version, sort of that authenticity of like, I think Richard is just a genuinely, great guy, great entrepreneur, and, wanted us all to succeed, recognized the role that we played in helping his company, grow. And so I've tried to do the same thing. No task is, is above me, as we've built the business. And, I have a very specific way that I think about culture. But I didn't sort of come up with that until, a couple years ago. So, I think, again, what I've tried to do with the company is like be very clear about what we're trying to achieve, be very clear about the kind of the core values, the non-negotiables, and then do what you say, kind of have your actions match your words always. And if you just do that, I think you can end up with something pretty great. And I look at Richard, I look at a guy named Aaron Christensen, who was my boss at WorldCom. I look at Bob Perini, who is my business partner, one of them. They're all, they all operate the same way. Very consistent in actions and words.
You'd mentioned kind of noting like some of the best things that these former bosses did and ideas that you had, as well. Did you keep actual notes of these things to one day implement for yourself? Or is this something you just kept in the back of your mind, or something you journaled or something like that?
A little bit of all of that. I mean, I don't know if there's probably a name for this, but I'm not smart enough to know what it is. I am sensitive to sort of the personal dynamics within an organization. I mean, I'm sensitive to the way people behave. I'm sensitive to the way people act. I'm just attuned to that, or like I have an intuition about that stuff. I always have. And so, I didn't like, with Richard, I remember thinking, I don't ever want to come across, I don't even want to give the contrast, but I worked for another company where shortly after joining, it was a much bigger company. Shortly after joining, I started to get on the elevator with the regional manager, and a teammate of mine grabbed my sport coat, my suit jacket from behind. I remember I had a big Dunkin' Donuts coffee and my laptop bag in the other hand. And he pulled me out of the elevator, like as the door was closing, with this regional manager and I guess it was his executive assistant, on the elevator. And like I spilled the coffee, I turn around, kind of like WTF, like what in the world just happened? Yeah. And he said, you never, ever ride on the elevator with that guy. Like,
oh my gosh.
That is the regional big cheese. And, if he goes into the bathroom and you're going, find a way to get out, sneak out. Wow. And I remember thinking like, it's like the ego of the whole situation. I remember thinking, I never, ever want to come across that way ever. And there's some people that are into that whole, like, I don't know if investment banks are like that or the law firms, but where it's this power dynamic, where like if you're a junior so-and-so associate, you don't talk to a partner, type of thing. It's like,
Yeah.
But that's not the kind of environment that I'd ever want to work for. My immediate boss at WorldCom would get in every single day at like 5:30, 6:30 in the morning every day. Most of the team didn't get there until, maybe 8, something like that. And I remember him telling me, I came in early one day to meet with him or for training or whatever. And I remember him telling me, I am the youngest manager in WorldCom. Like out of 100,000 plus employees, I'm the youngest. We're the youngest team. I had to get special permission, to become, manager, this early. And we are going to be number one. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And so I come in early in support of you guys. And I remember thinking like kind of that servant leadership. I remember thinking if I'm ever running a team, I'm going to be the first one in and the last person to leave. And I am here to support them, not vice versa. So, again, I didn't ever write that down, but I went in early multiple times, to get FaceTime with him. And he used to say, I'm the king, or I have mastered the WorldCom curveball, meaning there was all this stuff, even after you sold something, there was all this stuff that had to happen before you got paid. And in a huge company like that, it's so convoluted, and you're not going to change the system by complaining about it. You got to figure out how to navigate the system. And he was a sharp guy.
Hey, you're listening to the Nice Podcast with Dave Delaney. That's me. Visit Futureforth.com to learn how we can transform the communication at your organization. And if you need a speaker for your next online event or your in-person conference, are we doing in-person conferences yet? Soon, I hope. You can visit DaveDelaneySpeaks.com and you'll learn more about working with me there. All right, let's get back to the show.
And then most of the rest of the stuff that I came up with came from Bob Perini. I worked for Bob for 4.5 years before starting Blue Corona. We started Blue Corona together, like co-founders. And just about every other, ism or thing that I've picked up is basically, stuff that, that Bob kind of instilled in me, or how he kind of ran his company. And I thought, man, this is fantastic. If I ever run a company, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm just going to kind of mirror or emulate, what he does.
And you started
what I've done.
Yeah. And you started Blue Corona in 2008, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. 2008, 2007, we started, I was working for Bob. He had a company, still has a company called Drink More Water, bottled water delivery company. It's the largest privately held bottled water delivery company, or one of the largest. I don't know if it still is, but, in the country. And, I was working for Bob, and, Bob had launched multiple companies kind of out of the water company. So I didn't go to work for the water company per se. I went to work for Bob. It's like, I want to work for this guy. He has a Harvard MBA. I was thinking about getting an MBA, and he said, well, rather than you try to get into Harvard and spend that kind of money and have to basically go full time because they don't have a part-time program, I'll give you a practical version. And if you're, creative and as smart as you say you are, maybe we'll start a business together. And that he had already done that. So it wasn't like a tall order. It was like, I see that guy running this company. Well, he started as a X for me, and see that lady over there, she was doing this, and now, pitched me on that idea. So, so I was working for Bob, and in 2007, we were doing some things. We had built a piece of software for his business, for the water business, and, sort of repurposed it. And that became the core of Blue Corona.
That's fascinating. So, and you and Bob met, I mean, it sounds like he was a pretty powerful mentor as well to you. So you met as an employee under him? Is that right?
I think I actually met him. Bob always jokes around that history has a way of retelling itself, and this could be one of the ways. I had a weird career sort of, I made a weird career choice. I left kind of tech sales, and I went to work for a sports marketing firm. And when I was working at that sports marketing firm, one of the things that we did was we sold, the sponsorships for local amateur events. So think of Chicago Marathon, DC Triathlon, Cherry Blossom 5K, 10K, whatever, all all those events, there's companies that sell the sponsorships, to Under Armour or to Navy Federal Credit Union, et cetera, and they take a commission. And so I was working in Chicago. WorldCom had gone Chapter 11.
Right.
I was looking for a way to get back to the DC area, which is where I was from. Met this guy in Chicago who owned this sports marketing firm with a regional office in DC. So I moved back to the area. And Drinkmore, as you might imagine, at running races and triathlons and bike races, Drinkmore was always there as a water sponsor, right? With like the water station where the runners go by and, on like a marathon, there's all those running stations where you basically run by, grab a cup of water and go. And so Drinkmore would be there as the water sponsor. So I met the guy who was a owner of Drinkmore Water, who worked for Bob. And I used to see him at all the events, and we became kind of friendly. And one day he called me and said, I'm from Maine, and my wife's from Maine, and her parents are sick, or we need to be closer to them. And I want you to come and interview for my job at Drinkmore.
Huh.
And I think I had met Bob once before mountain biking. Bob's a big biker, mountain bike, road bike. And back then I was a big cyclist. And, I guess it was actually a very little cyclist compared to what I am today. I was much thinner back then. And so I think I met Bob mountain biking. But then, really, hadn't put it all together until Phil, his right-hand guy, called me up and said, hey, I want you to come in. And Phil was the vice president. That was his title at Drinkmore. And I thought, I'm a regional sales manager at that time. And I thought, it might be kind of cool to kind of get out from just being in sales, quote unquote, to learning more about the rest of aspects of business. But Drinkmore Water was a really small company, like $4 or $5 million company at that time. And so having worked for hotjobs.com, WorldCom, these publicly traded companies, and then going to work for Bob, it was much different. I didn't have like a budget or like, there wasn't all this bureaucracy of, the WorldCom curveball didn't exist. It was like, if I wanted something done, I could just say, Bob, I have a great idea, and lay it out for him. And then he had the power to say, that's awesome, do it, or you're an idiot. Let's talk about, there's a learning moment in here.
Right. That's interesting. So with Bob, you could ride the elevator with him. We
didn't have an elevator, but if we had one, yes, I could ride an elevator with him. We went mountain biking together. We would go out to Park City and Park City, Utah, and go on bike trips and stuff. And Bob is just like Richard. And again, maybe there's a whole different Richard Johnson that I don't know. But Bob, one of the things that I always admired about Bob was like there is one Bob. He is like, it's not like he's at work with the work face on and then, with his family and as someone else.
Right.
I joke around. People talk a lot about work-life balance, and I am not a preacher of just because I do something, you should do it. But what I felt like with Bob was there was no difference between, like, Bob was kind of always working and never working at the same time. Like work, he used to tell me, like, business is a game. It's a sport. It's no different than like, if you're into like video games or something, but only with business, it's life changing when you win, when you advance to the next level. And so, we'd be on a plane flying somewhere, on a weekend for like a fun trip, play golf or go biking. And next thing you know, Bob would be back by like the restroom. This was, might have been, I guess it was probably post 9/11, but Bob'd be like waiting back for the restroom. He'd be like talking to some random guy, about where we're going and whatever. And next thing you know, he'd come back and give me the guy's business card and say, like, when we get back, call this guy. He wants to set up he wants to talk about X or what we're doing with digital marketing for Drinkmore. And I'm like, you met the guy like at the bathroom on the plane? Like, and Bob's like, well, I just told him where we were going. And then I asked him what he did for a living. And then all of a sudden we were, shooting the breeze. And so I'm the same way. I don't draw these lines between work and home, fun and toil.
Right.
I don't see it that way.
Well, you've got to enjoy what you do. I mean, or you don't have to, but of course it's going to make life pretty crummy.
I mean, and then when we have employees, I had an employee once that said to me, you're asking us to give up our life for Blue Corona and And the vision is to help small businesses grow and creates jobs and all this kind of stuff. And we need a more compelling vision, in order to like sacrifice our lives for the company. And I said, wait, just stop for a second. First, if what you've heard from all my ranting and speeches that I give to the company is that I'm asking you to give up your life, like a mission for Blue Corona, I'm so sorry. Like I have way miscommunicated my intention, because I do not want you to give up your life. I do not want you to miss significant life events in the name of growing Blue Corona and helping our customers succeed. That's number one. Number two, what we're passionate about, what I'm passionate about, helping businesses grow. I mean, Elon Musk might want to colonize Mars. There's nothing I could be less interested in than colonizing Mars. Google might want to organize the world's information. I love Google and they're a key part of our business. There's nothing about that I'm particularly into. So I said to that person who mentioned that to me, if that's how you feel, that would be like a big red, orange flag that this may not be the right place for you to plant your long-term roots. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'll help you find something that's more compelling for you. And in the meantime, certainly do not give up your life in the name of helping Blue Corona win, because that's I get passionate and worked up about stuff, but
sure.
You might have misinterpreted. I might have miscommunicated.
What year do you think that was, give or take?
Probably 2013, 14, somewhere in there.
Okay.
That area.
Yeah, I was curious because you started winning awards in 2012, and I was thinking this might have been one of those moments that you realized maybe you need to like communicate your own goals for the company and for the culture itself more, differently perhaps, or was there some revelation in that? Was it just like one guy that misunderstood, or was it maybe like, oh wait, I should probably like really tell everybody, hey, this is not life, this is part of life.
No, I probably still err on the side of, we have always tried to grow the business quickly, to be the best at what we do, to be the authority within our space. So like when we want it to be, when you think of home services, the best digital marketing company out there, we want you to think of Blue Corona. And, maybe this is a poor analogy, but it's like, would be more like winning the gold medal than like winning your, county's, championship,
right.
In like Little League. There are a lot of companies that want to be the best in our space and that play in our space, and on a national, international level. Some that have raised, millions of dollars, so that they're doing it on borrowed money. In order to win that game, you're going to have to work your ass off. I mean, it's a combination of being creative, working smart and all that stuff. But there is an element of just, it's going to be hard to try to achieve that goal. And we hold ourselves to a high standard. There's no, unlike in the Olympics, there's no tangible, you've done it. Even when we think we might be the best, it's like, no, we could still be better.
Right.
That's not for everyone. That kind of intensity. But, we have out of roughly 100 employees, probably 50 have been with the company for 5+ years. For those folks, a lot of them are intense. I mean, they like that, they like that intensity. That doesn't mean they don't take 2 weeks off and go to Thailand or take vacations or, go on leave when they have kids. It doesn't mean that they don't do that stuff.
Yeah.
Some do, some don't. We encourage it, but I would also say, you didn't really ask this, but I guess I've always been, I don't like being told what to do. I like people that are inspiring. I mean, I'm an inspirable person, but I don't like being told what to do. So my goal in one way as a leader has been to sort of talk about the things that get me jazzed up. And if it gets you jazzed up enough to find yourself lost in the work that you're doing or doing stuff like trying to help us, innovate sort of beyond your your role, awesome. If it doesn't, that's cool too.
Right.
I'm not going to tell you, you got to come in. If you want to get promoted, you're going to have to put in the big, it's like, I would never say it that way.
Yeah.
And it's not true. We've had plenty of people that are just, we had a guy who's unfortunately no longer with us where, he was a developer and we had this project that we were all doing. And as best we could tell, we had to copy stuff out of Excel and paste it into a browser, into like a field, a form field, and then hit enter or submit, let it kind of germinate and then repeat. And we had thousands of things that we had to do. So we divided up amongst the team. And at that time, we were probably 30 people. And I'm walking out to lunch and I go by his workspace and he's got his feet up on the desk. He's watching NCAA basketball. He had 3 screens, NCAA basketball on one screen, chess on another screen. And the other screen is like, I don't know what's happening on the other screen. And I'm like, Robert, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
Like, we're all supposed to be doing this thing. And he goes, I am doing it. And he minimizes the one screen and he's written a macro. And the macro is just automatically doing the work.
Right.
And I said, that's awesome. Have you shown everyone else how to do it? And he's like, it's not my fault. They can't, they can't figure it out. And, it's like, Robert, we need to talk.
Yeah. Oh man, he was so close.
We play as a team, brother. Like, we are not in the, I'm better than you. I figure something out, a better mousetrap, and I'm going to exploit it, at everyone else's, peril. But
oh man, I might need Robert's number after every time I'm doing data entry in a spreadsheet, I'm thinking there's got to be a better way.
You always want someone on your team who is just smart as hell and lazy. One of those people, because they just are always going to look for like, how can I not do work? How can I not do work?
Right. So did you start Blue Corona as a home services? Like, was that who you were trying to service, or did you just fall into that, or tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we started, again, we had built a marketing kind of tracking platform for Drinkmore Water. Mm-hmm. Half of Drinkmore's customer base, and at that time it was probably 10,000 customers. Half of them were residential, so it'd be a home service getting bottled water delivered to your house, and half were commercial. And so I remember, so we also had an office coffee business. So this was a bottled water company. One of the entrepreneurial ideas that I worked with, it wasn't my idea, I was running it for Bob, was a office coffee business. Like, hey, we already have 10,000 customers. What can we overlay? What else could we sell, right? So office coffee. The Keurig was brand new, single cup brewers. So we got a Keurig distributorship and we were doing coffee. I was doing a coffee demo at a plumbing company, and it was a $15 million plumbing company. And again, my employer at that time was probably a $5 million company. So a $15 million company was like, wow, this company is huge, right? And they must be really sophisticated. And I'm doing the coffee demo, and the owner comes down and I'm walking him through the coffee brewer. And I said, hey, I'm just curious. I do all the marketing for Drinkmore Water. As a plumbing company, residential plumbing company, you got to do a lot of marketing, yellow page ads and all that stuff. This was way back 2006, 2007. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what? I'm just curious. We track all of our yellow page advertising, and the leads are going straight down. The cost per lead is going straight up because the reps haven't lowered the ad prices at all. The return on investment is terrible. I mean, it's like going like a hockey stick going the wrong way. And he just looked at me and he goes, how in the world would you know that? Like, how would you track that? And he grabbed his VP of marketing and he says, tell her what you just said to me. And I went through it again, and she was like, well, we decide what to do with our ads based on our competitors. So if our competitor's running like a full page 4-color ad in the yellow pages, the rep kind of tells us, and then we look at our budget and we do the same. And I went running back to Bob and was like, dude, we're in the wrong business. I don't want to run the coffee business because that has a geographic limitation. The guy that owns this plumbing company has no idea how any of his different advertising channels are actually performing. With the yellow pages, his vice president of marketing bragged that they do whatever the competitors are doing using data from the sales rep. It was like, I was like literally like lemmings just running off a cliff together.
Yeah.
And so that's how that's how that got started. And my point there is that we didn't start with home services per se, but some of our early customers were. We had a couple early customers that were plumbing, HVAC, electrical, or some combination of those. Mm-hmm. We had a bunch of bottled water companies back then. And then we had other, realtors, and, we had some accountants. So we were not vertically focused. And that's actually, Bob always, sort of oddly to me, Bob always discouraged me from verticalizing the business, which is, very popular these days to verticalize.
Yeah.
And Bob was very anti, verticalization. So we were, up until 2018, in 2018, we probably had 45% of our customers were home services, maybe 50%. So it was a big portion, the biggest single portion of any vertical, but we were not as laser focused on that. And then I hired a VP of sales and marketing, and he said, "Why are you trying to be all things to all people?"
Right.
If you want me to be the best in every one of these categories, the marketing budget's got to go way up, because I'm going to be, I'm going to have to go to every, industry event. I've got to get, content produced for every industry publication, case studies for every industry.
Yeah.
So that's how we started narrowing the focus. And at that point, I had bought shares from Bob, and so he was still a shareholder, but he's a smaller shareholder. And, so it was sort of like, if he disagreed, it was like, "Hey, man, I hear you, but this is what we're doing."
I love that. And, I partly ask that for myself sometimes, because I think about that a lot, and the whole riches and niches line that you hear so often. So, but you talked about also, and it made me laugh, and actually it was a question I had here regarding competitors and competition, because, talking about the Yellow Pages guys of just like following the other Yellow Pages guys, mm-hmm. and following their competitors. I was perusing your LinkedIn profile, and there's a recommendation there from John Payne, who wrote, I won't read the whole thing here. It's great though. I mean, it looks great, but he wrote, Ben's company has been let me try that again. Ben's company has been one of my agency's closest competitors for several years, but I also consider him a colleague, a friend, and an advisor. And he goes on from there, which I think is fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit about, relationships with competitors and how you think about those?
Yeah, it's as you might imagine, it's a fun and complicated subject. I find myself saying a lot that I almost, it's like I put on one set of glasses and I see the world through that set, and then I'll take that set off and I'll put another set on and I see the world differently. Or maybe a different analogy would be like, on one shoulder, I've got one voice saying like, the world is, there's abundance in the world, and it's not you versus John Payne. It's you and John Payne versus like this enormous market. It's a huge world.
Yeah.
On the other shoulder, I have, a voice saying, this whole, like, let's share everything, content marketing, tell everyone everything that you're doing because HubSpot says so.
Right.
Is, there's an element of that, which is like, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger would have you believe differently. And for as successful as Dharmesh and Brian Halligan have been, I would at this point, maybe years from now, I'll regret this, but I would choose Charlie Munger, over the rest of the group. But anyway, so going back to that is, I think, I'm huge on competitive analysis.
Yeah.
And sort of, and so on the one hand, like when that, VP from the plumbing company said, "Oh, we do whatever the competitors do." So I'm not for doing whatever the competitors do, but trying to get into the minds of the competitors. Like, what could they be seeing that I'm not seeing? Or, what are they doing and how does it appear to be working? What data can I get, about that? I'm big on that. And then with kind of, frenemies, I think there is, I do think like if you look at digital marketing, it is a industry in its infancy still, which means it's expanding so rapidly that it really is rarely, me versus you. There's just so much business out there to be had.
Right.
So that's one, set of thinking. And the other thing is that I think I see competitors as nuanced. Like even though John said we were a competitor, we might have been a competitor for ranking for Maryland SEO or something goofy like that, which might have been important to us like 10 years ago. But I can only remember one time in all the years that John had his company that we came up against them for a piece of business. And I don't remember who got it, but if they got it, we shouldn't have got it because they were doing things, kind of executing a different playbook than we were. And sort of like if that was going to work for you, we probably wouldn't have been the right people. Like I think John was like big on link building and all that kind of stuff. And we were not doing any link building back then, at all. So I mean, I guess I look at it in a more nuanced, more nuanced way. I think at first pass, you can look at a lot of companies and go, oh, how could you guys be friendly? You're competitors. I also think you get to a size where, it's much more interesting to me to talk to a competitor and kind of understand our gross margins and, why are you putting managers below the line instead of above the line? And how do you think about this? That's more valuable than some stuff that I might give away. And one final piece, which I'm sure you're aware of, and I'm sure a lot of your audience is aware of, is you also realize when you've been running a business for a while that the idea, the knowledge, that is like the tiniest piece. The execution is everything. And executing is brutal. Like if you're a non-technical founder and someone showed you their software platform and that was like your missing thing, I would bet against you every time trying to like take what you learned about this other company's technology and bolting it onto your service company, now that you're aware of it, if you're a non-technical founder.
Right.
It's so much harder than people appreciate. So you can share away, like Dharmesh and Brian could tell you everything you could ever want to know about building a multi-billion-dollar SaaS platform. And, it's like, what are you going to do with that? Go out and start a HubSpot too? Good luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think the last time I spoke at their conference was 2015. And at that time, I think there was like 13,000 attendees. And, actually I mentioned Mark Maron earlier, the WTF podcast guy. He was up against me at the same time and he was a way bigger draw. And I was like, uh-oh. And, thankfully I had a few hundred people show up. So that was good.
Now, just interestingly about HubSpot is, we were, recruited to be like a VAR back in the day. I don't remember when. I thought it was after we made the Inc. 500, so it was probably 2013 or something. And I remember we got their terms and conditions to be a VAR, and they had in there, it was like very subtle, that once you brought someone on board, you entered them into like their Salesforce account or whatever, and you tagged yourself as like the VAR, their team could go out and sell services directly to, quote unquote, your client. It basically became their client.
Ooh.
And so Bob's comment to me was, maybe HubSpot is so focused on the software that they don't care, and they're not actually going to take opportunity away from all these partners. But when we were growing the office coffee business, we grew all these accounts. And then Keurig got bought by Green Mountain. And Green Mountain started soliciting our delivery customers directly, allowing them to order online for less than we were buying the coffee at wholesale.
Oh man. Just
price. I was like, what if that were to happen? What if HubSpot were to suddenly start offering SEO services and just reach out to all your customers? I mean, they're a venture backed. This was before they went public, venture backed. company. Now, on the flip side, if you stay out of their ecosystem, once they go public, they may start to realize that it's faster to buy growth than to grow organically. And if all of your customers were not, already hooked up to them, and you had, 1,000 customers, they might come along and pay a hefty multiple, because then you can sell HubSpot through your 1,000 customers. And so we turned away from that. And I was envious at times, because I'd see, sort of what were kind of little companies at Inbound, giving speeches and writing books, and Brian's like the forward in the book or whatever. And I'm like, man, that would be like, I should have hitched my horse to that, to that carriage. But,
right.
Ultimately, I don't know that it would have, they haven't done what I worried that they would do.
Right.
But I also am not sure, that we would have been any better off, having done that.
I noticed a video that you posted on your LinkedIn page. I didn't check your other socials, but I imagine it's probably there too, which is a really great compilation of yourself and your team members all thanking healthcare workers. And I thought that was just such a nice move.
Poorly produced, good thought. That was at the beginning of the pandemic. And
yeah,
we had a bunch of employees that had, spouses who were, nurses, EMTs, firefighters. And it was like, man, what can we do?
Yeah, I think it was nice. I mean, in fact, I liked it even in its, as you said, like kind of poor quality, like lower budget or whatever.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think a super slick Super Bowl ad would have been less effective. I think it was more genuine coming across as it did. That, everybody's at home working from home clearly. And each person at home has their own setup, and some know, this better than others or whatever. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, production value wasn't the important point. It was the message there. And to that point, or to that question, and I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to ask you this question, then jump into the lightning round and we'll be wrapped up. But I wanted to ask you, how has the pandemic been for your culture specifically? How are you handling things obviously differently, given sort of where we are right now or where we've been?
Yeah, I every time I think about that, I'm conflicted, because on the one hand, I think we have really thrived, through the pandemic, in a bunch of different ways, and I'll hit on a couple at a really high level. But where I'm torn is that, I am, it's almost like what is it? It's like Murphy's Law, that you say how great everything is going, and then all of a sudden, you're blindsided.
Right.
I don't want to discount how difficult it's been for, not every one of our employees has a great work from home setup. Not every one of our employees, like my wife was a teacher, but stopped working a couple years ago. So when our kids were at home, when schools were remote, my wife was in the kitchen, and we had one kid in the dining room and one kid in the family room, my wife in the middle. And whether they needed help with a printer or their math problem or Zoom or whatever, she was just darting all day back and forth between the two kids. So I didn't have to do any of that. I just had to deal with the global pandemic and how it was affecting our business.
Right.
But for the two working parents or partners where, they're triaging kids and kids are running in covered with like super glue and they're in a Zoom with a client. I mean, I in no way can I imagine how difficult that was. So one thing I will say is, one is we had our whole business is in the cloud. All of our employees are digital natives. They're very comfortable with Zoom and video chat and chatting and all the technology gimmicks that can help you kind of navigate, your day. So we had a leg up there, as opposed to like, you're muted, Bob, like that kind of thing. We didn't have any of that.
That's good.
Number one. Number two, we had these rituals built in to the culture, like the weekly huddle. And then we added some new ones immediately. Mike Wilson, who's our president, like me, is also very attuned to, sort of culture. He is like the best coach manager I've ever experienced in my career.
Yeah. Wow.
And so he just intuitively knows, you know, if we can't all be together, we need other things that can create this sense of team. So I want to say our culture got better because we had an office in Maryland and an office in Charlotte. And when everyone went remote, all of a sudden there was total parity. You know, whereas before, we're not split up geographically. So you'd have a team, like an account manager, designer, writer, pay-per-click person, split between the offices. They're not all together. But, you know, when there are groups of people together, you know, you have people that are going to lunch, people that are kind of chit-chatting around the office that develop these subcultures. And, you know, I didn't realize how much that had affected us until we went 100% remote.
Yeah.
And then that was diminished. It wasn't gone because people still live in some people still live in the same city and they get together outside of work. But we've done very well, but I just, you know, I don't have this, I'm never going to get on LinkedIn and say like, why do we ever need to go back to the office? You know, offices are stupid. You know, we don't need that. Like, yeah, our culture is fantastic, you know, even remote. I'm never going to do that because I don't know if that's going to, I don't know if that's, you know, all I will say is we show up every day and are just very deliberate and sort of constantly sort of watching and triangulating and, you know, how's the team seem to be doing? What are the issues that we're having? You know, what's getting better? What's getting worse? And again, what do we need to change to help us get closer to the vision of what we're trying to do in our goals? And, I don't pretend to know, you know, we opened the Charlotte office, for hoteling, and sort of more on a limited basis. And then, you know, we were supposed to go down to Charlotte for our quarterly business review, 12 people. And the governor gets on like 2 days before we're supposed to go down there and says, you know, cases are spiking.
Right.
You know, wear a mask at the office. Try not to come in if you can avoid it. And it's like, geez, there goes that plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of businesses are now looking for creative ways to kind of keep teams engaged, you know, virtually. I'm finding that myself in a lot of the stuff that I do. So let's move on to the lightning round. I've got a question about completing this sentence. So the sentence is, nice guys and gals finish.
It depends. It depends. I'm a what's the guy's name who wrote Give and Take? Adam Grant. I'm an Adam Grant fan. I think you can be nice, but there's the people that seem to do the best are not I don't know what you'd even call it. They're I can't remember what he calls them. They're like
givers and takers. Or?
Yeah, well, there's something in the middle. You know, I'm an anti-taker, anti-mean. I would say choose kind. So I would like to say, you know, just you'll have a much better life, you know, being nice and choosing to be kind. But Adam Grant talks about the people that do the best are those that are sort of tactful. You know, they're not pushovers. Mm-hmm. You know, nice to a fault, I suppose.
Yeah, I believe in like being nice. I kind of obsess around nice over kindness in a way because I don't, you know, downplay kindness. Obviously, kindness is a huge and very important thing in life and in everything we do, and in just being good people. But I also think that, the same thing, like you can be nice and be kind, but also, you know, defend your family or your peeps if you need to, however you need to. So, you know, and that may not be the kindest thing necessarily, but it's still being nice to the most important people and you know, the stakeholders or your family or whomever. So, yeah, I'm a big Adam Grant fan too. Think Again. I'm in the middle of that right now. Have you read that?
Not yet. No.
Oh my gosh, man. I'm going to mail out a lot of copies of this to people just ahead of the next presidential election because this is mandatory.
Is that the one where he talks about how to change your mind?
Yes.
I heard him on a podcast, and I can't remember, Farnham Street, I think is the name of it.
Yep.
So I heard him talking through that, and I loved that episode, but I haven't read the book.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through. I'm kind of a slow reader, but it's a fantastic book. And I mean, it's really well written anyway. He does a great job of weaving in, really interesting stories and things. But, just a fascinating book. So speaking of what's a nice book that you would recommend to the nice makers?
Winner's Dream by Bill McDermott. That is my hands down favorite business book. As far as I can tell, I could be wrong, but as far as I can tell, Bill McDermott, who is now the CEO of ServiceNow, but he was the CEO of SAP, is, one of those folks that, again, walks the walk, seems like a genuinely, just a fantastic leader. And the book is basically an autobiography. And if you listen to it, if you're an Audible fan and you listen to it, it's Bill speaking, which is kind of cool because he's a pretty big shot to be reading his own book. But my only comment there was listen to him in regular speed, and then put him in 1.25 speed. And tell me if he doesn't sound better. He's from New York, which, New Yorkers are known to speak quickly. But if I ever meet Bill in person, I'm going to let him listen to himself in 1.25. And I just be shocked if he doesn't agree with me that just a little bit faster, and he just would be like just be perfect.
I have a tip for you when consuming audiobooks or podcasts, which is typically like when you listen, or at least when most people listen to audiobooks or podcasts, they're doing something else. They're working out or they're driving somewhere or whatever. They're not just sitting there listening usually. So, and I'm a big, like every book I read or digital book I read, not nonfiction, or the actual hard copy, I will take tons of notes within the book and then I'll return and transcribe those notes later into like a blog post or something. So I retain the information basically. And one thing I was struggling with listening to audiobooks was I'd be driving and I'd hear something interesting and then I'd keep driving and it would be gone. So what I started doing was taking a screenshot of the podcast app or the Audible app, take a screenshot of it in the timeline and then go back to that timeline later to re-listen to that part. So
I use Audible, and there's I think it's called Clips.
Okay.
And so you hit clip, and then I would record voice to text. I'm usually hiking when I'm listening to them, and I would just record a description of the part, but then the thought. The problem that I have is it takes me forever to get, for the same reason that you're mentioning, it takes me forever to get through stuff because I have like epiphany after epiphany, idea after idea.
Right.
And I know that if I don't record it in the moment, I'll lose it.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. Like you think of how spoiled we are now. I've been watching the amazing. I'm like, I like the Beatles. I've always respected the Beatles, but I've never gone out and bought any Beatles music, but I like the Beatles. And, I've been watching the HBO or the Hulu series with, Paul McCartney and Rick Rubin. Have you seen this?
No.
It's fantastic. But, there's a scene when Paul McCartney's talking about Yesterday and how he literally dreamt that song up and woke up and thought of that song, like realized, like had the melody already in his head and was scrambling. He was at his girlfriend's place. So he rushed over to her piano to play the melody out to help him remember it. And then he rushed home. He didn't write music. He doesn't know how to read or write music. And so then he rushed home to get his guitar to start playing it because at the time, we didn't have like recording devices just right next to us. So, pretty fascinating. So we've come a long way, baby.
Yeah, that sounds awesome too.
So how is Ben nice to himself?
How is Ben nice to himself? I'm not sure that I always am. I've been better since with the pandemic, just in being, just being conscious of, sort of again, the little voice in my head, which is my worst critic, and doing sort of like a pattern interrupt with that. And just in doing that, I just realized how often I just beat the crap out of myself. And again, I don't remember who said this, Dan Harris or someone was talking about, to the extent that little voice is useful, there is a utility and that kind of stuff, but you have to recognize when you've gone past the line where it's gone from useful to damaging. And so I think these days I'm I'm pretty good, when I make a mistake, when I flop on my face, if I do something, embarrassing, I say something in front of the team and go, why in the world did I say that? I have, kind of the ability to go, oh, it's like one of those things that you look back on and you kind of laugh. I during the pandemic, without traveling, I had the ability, to focus more on my health and my diet. And, I would have days where I would just lose it, and just eat a bunch of crap. Mm-hmm. And, in the past, I would have really given myself an earful, and it was like, you know what, messed up, start over tomorrow, and just get it back on track. One mess up, I've become more long term, focused and a little bit more patient with each passing year. I get a little bit more patient with myself.
That's great. And Dan Harris is awesome. I'm a big. I don't know if big, but I do, I meditate and practice mindfulness as much as I can. But I still consider myself a total novice, even though, maybe been a year or two.
I thought that part in his book was just so good. At one point, he kind of says, you must be asking yourself, if you're listening to this book, how do a bunch of people in New York City, which is the most aggressive career place in the world. How can you be Zen-like when people are trying to steal your job, get the promotion, all that kind of stuff. And that was up until that point of the book. I was kind of thinking how does all this Zen-like stuff is great if you have a trust fund and, and
yeah, right.
just hang out. But this is a competitive world. And so when he said, to the extent that it's helpful, it's you can use it, but you got to learn when to basically shut it off. And I started realizing I go way past where that was helpful. So I've become more nice to myself in that regard.
Yeah. I like that. And if you had a billboard, what would it say?
If I had a billboard, what would it say? This is supposed to be lightning, right? Under promise, over deliver.
I like that. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you and learn from you. So I really do appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. Theme music provided by Alistair Crystal at alistaircrystal.ca. Hey, if you enjoyed the conversation, please take a moment to leave us a review. The links are in the description. I'll have more of that soon. Did you know that new subscribers of the Nice Maker email newsletter receive a free copy of my little ebook, Improve with Improv? Each Friday, I share nice stories, tools, tips, and much more, and you can grab it now from nicemaker.co or by clicking the link in the episode description. I'm Dave Delaney. Take care and be nice.
You probably know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? I'm Jason Falls, and I host Winfluence, the Influence Marketing Podcast. Now, you'll note I didn't say influencer marketing. I said influence marketing. Why? Because the goal is to truly influence an audience to take action. We talk about the strategies and stories that move beyond engaging just social media influencers and tap into your community to find influential voices. It's a different way of looking at it. We call it community commerce marketing. Influencers are still a piece of it, but there's so much more. I talk to creators, brand and agency side marketers, and the thinkers in the space to help grow your business. Come learn with me on Winfluence, the Influence Marketing Podcast. Find it at winfluencepod.com, marketingpodcasts.net, or search for Winfluence wherever you get your podcasts.